Hello and welcome to Inside Edition to discuss national, regional and international issues in depth. Each year, the U.S. Department of State honors individuals around the world who have devoted their lives to the fight against human trafficking. These individuals include NGO workers, lawmakers, government officials, survivors of human trafficking and concerned citizens who are committed to ending modern slavery. They're recognized for their tireless efforts despite resisting opposition and threats to their lives to protect victims, punish offenders, and raise awareness of human trafficking trends in their countries and abroad. And today we are joined by one of them, which is considered the first GCC representative to be recognized as a Trafficking in Persons Report hero. We are joined by CEO of the Labor Market Regulatory Authority and Chairman of the National Committee to Combat Trafficking in Persons, Mr. Ausamah AlAbsi. He was recently honored by the U.S. Secretary of State Michael Pompeo and Presidential Advisor Ivanka Trump during the launch of the U.S. State Department Report on Trafficking in Persons, the TIP 2018, on the achievement.
Please join me in welcoming Advisor to the President, Ms. Ivanka Trump, as we present awards to the 2018 TRIP Heroes.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary, for your meaningful words and for using your voice for this important issue. And now we will ask each TIP Report hero to stand up when I call out their name and country and join us to receive their award. Mr. Ausamah AlAbsi from Bahrain. In recognition of his perseverance in advocating for victim-centered policies within the government by establishing one of the region's top shelters for trafficking victims, launching the government's new National Referral Mechanism for trafficking victims, and spearheading efforts to reduce the vulnerability of foreign workers by reforming the government sponsorship system.
We welcome in the studio Mr. Ausamah AlAbsi. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
We first would like to congratulate you on being the first GCC representative to be recognized and to honor us with this reward itself, Trafficking in Persons Report Hero. In this regard, can you tell us a little bit about this great achievement and how is such an award actually valued internationally and nationally?
Well, first of all, the award itself is as important as it is. It's not as important as Bahrain getting Tier 1 as the first country in the Middle East and Africa to achieve this status. Had I been given the award without Bahrain achieving this status, the award itself would have been meaningless.
Yes.
Because the award recognizes the efforts, and I received it in my capacity as chairman of the National Committee for Combating Trafficking. So I represent the committee that represents the efforts of Bahrain. The award is not personal. I don't like to think of it that way. It was a collective effort, not of individuals, but of whole of government approach. We addressed it together since the reorganization of the National Committee back in 2015. And this comes only as a recognition to a long struggle, a lot of effort. Everyone pulled their weight within government and civil society. And I just happen to represent them.
Yes. Mr. AlAbsi, we know that these efforts have been going on for years. You've been heading the committee and you've been head of this this entity for a while, and there are a lot of changes that happened. We can see within the last 6, 7, 10 years. What can you tell us about the ones that for you stood out the most, the changes that you see stood out the most, that might basically be the reason behind being happy about an award like that you received?
To start with, the crime of trafficking in persons, and you rightly said the term modern slavery, was misunderstood originally. People thought or associated only with vice trade, and just kind of narrowed the definition.
Yes.
So the first thing we needed to do is to expand the definition in accordance with the law and get people to be aware of what are the practices that could be or could fall under the legal definition of trafficking, including forced labor, including debt bondage, including servitude. So it's not only about vice or prostitution or things like that.
Yes.
And I think the biggest achievement was to create this awareness, both at an official level, a unified understanding in every ministry, in every police station, in every first respondent, as well as create the awareness within society. So everything else that comes, everything that is either a structure, a building, a process, all of these come after the realization, after you've created the awareness. And that is where the real challenge comes. Trafficking happens around us. Trafficking happens in everywhere we go. We are, as normal citizens, we are not immune.
Yes.
We are not sheltered from it. We have to be able to recognize it when we see it. We have to know where to report it. And if we can, we have to do our part to stop it. The beginning of it all was to increase the awareness, expand the definition, and unify it, have it across the board as a single understanding.
Yes.
Everything else that we did, establishing shelters or creating hotlines or putting together mechanisms, all of those come as a result of this new understanding.
Yes. So basically, what happened was people were made aware of what the actual definition of human trafficking is in its broad spectrum, because it does not, as you said, just confine itself to vice, but also to anybody who feels basically that they are being taken advantage of in their workplace when they come from their country and work in the countries, whether in the GCC or anywhere else. A global recognition like this award, and it is a global recognition, came as a result of so many procedures that were initiated and applied by the National Committee, as you said, to combat trafficking in persons. Can you tell us a little bit more about these initiatives? You told us that you have basically made them aware of the definition. What came after that?
We needed to first know what the issues were. So one of our first things to do was to create channels for people to contact us. People, creating a hotline, for example, 7 languages, 24 hours, 7 days a week is not enough. We did that, but we realized that we needed to reach out to houses of worship, to social bodies, clubs, societies, schools.
Yeah.
We needed to build bridges with the expat community at large, to tell them that we are here to help them if they need help.
Yeah.
The embassies and dealing with them was very important. The houses of worship were very important. We started dealing with everyone, in addition to putting places like the shelter or the Expat Protection Center. The Expat Protection Center works 24/7 as an emergency room for anyone who needs assistance or protection. Again, the hotline. We receive information and we receive calls for assistance through many different channels, including social media, including our dealings with NGOs outside Bahrain,
Yes.
who gives us certain distress calls. But it is to create the channels first, to have people trust in these channels to come to you. Second came to create a unified mechanism. So we started working with the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime and the International Organization for Migration to create a national referral mechanism.
Yeah.
The national referral mechanism, when we started working on it and we launched it in February 2017, came as a result of us realizing the width and breadth of the issues we had to deal with. It's not always trafficking.
Yeah.
One of the best ways to deal with trafficking is to help the vulnerable before they are trafficked. There is a stage in the whole process where someone is vulnerable, and if not assisted or protected, then they would be trafficked. So the idea of prevention comes at that stage. The National Referral Mechanism is a system, both administrative as well as legal, that brings together everyone in the government and even outside government into play. So it takes care of how does a first respondent report it. The first respondent could be a police officer, could be a doctor in the ER room, could be a labor inspector, could be a priest in a church.
True.
Anyone who would come in contact, the first person that comes in contact with a potential victim. Then how do they document it? Where to go? When it comes to us, how do we inform the relevant authorities and follow up? Let me give you an example.
Yeah.
When we first launched the National Referral Mechanism in February of 2017, in March we had a tip of a potential victim. The tip came through 2 countries into Bahrain. So it didn't come directly to us. The end-to-end process from receiving it till rescuing this person took 48 hours. And to me, at the time, it looked like a speedy process because it involves public prosecution, police, us, embassies, medical services, everyone. So 48 hours looks good. 11 months later, we had another tip. This year, earlier, first quarter of this year. And the end-to-end process took 90 minutes from receiving the tip till rescuing the person. So the National Referral Mechanism worked as choreographing, orchestrating, if you will, the efforts of everyone. And the more we practiced it, just like anything else, the better we became at it. This is one of my best achievements, or our best achievements. It's actually coming together as a single government, all different entities, understanding what the problem is and acting in sync. When you act in sync, you receive an email. It was just an email that was received by one of my staff. And 90 minutes later, that person is already safe in our shelter, being taken care of, as well as police and prosecutors doing their job in following the criminal. That is what I call an achievement. Everything else is superstructure. This is how the infrastructure administratively, legally works.
Yes. You mentioned in the beginning a very important factor that goes in within this process, which is trust. Basically, the fact that the people coming to Bahrain trust that the laws of Bahrain will protect them, that there are people like the people in the National Committee for Combating Trafficking that basically will take care of them if something happens. This is an entity that is there for the protection of the workers in Bahrain, as well as the people that live here that feel or might feel that they are going through the same thing. How does how far does trust go in your line of work?
It's the most important thing. And trust is something that you earn, you don't demand. You don't give guarantees and get trust. You give actions. You actually follow through. You walk the talk. And then people start to trust you and believe in what you're doing. We needed to reach out. We needed to actually demonstrate. Let me give you an example. The hotline that we have, 995, is manned by 7 languages. It's available around the clock. In a span of 12 months, we received close to 2,000 calls, other than just inquiries, 2,000 real calls. But do we have 2,000 trafficking cases? No. The trafficking cases that resulted from that was less than 4%. But the rest were people who needed help on another level.
Yeah.
I don't know how to get this. I don't know. My employer says this. I have a problem. Where do I go? We receive them all. We take them all. We log them all in the National Referral Mechanism. And we help them, even though it's not trafficking. Sometimes help is just by telling a guy, you go to the Ministry of Justice and you file a labor dispute case to get your back wages. This is who you go to, this is the form, this is how it works, this is their working hours. And he actually goes to Ministry of Justice and he gets his back wages. But he actually remembers that the people who told him where to go was here. So next time he's in trouble, he's going to pick up the phone as well. Next time a friend is in trouble, he's going to tell him where he got the assistance. So we started creating the trust by not turning anyone. You know, we don't say, oh, this is not trafficking, go find your way somewhere else. We started assisting people, and when doing so, people will remember, because we have the advantage of being in our own country, amongst our own people, knowing our own systems. You got to put yourself in the position of somebody who's not in his country, who needs the assurance. It's not enough that our laws protect the expats in Bahrain. The expats need to know that the laws protect them, need to know how to get access to justice, how to get their dues. And if they don't get that assurance in a practical, positive experience, they won't trust the system. So you start by creating trust through positive experiences. We never turn anyone at all.
The experiences are a very big part of this, and the National Committee to Combat Trafficking in Persons places a very high priority on their international outreach activities especially. Can you tell us, how did this help to represent the Kingdom's efforts specifically in the field of protecting people from human trafficking?
The outreach internationally is more to reflect what we're doing with the sending countries. We need to, first of all, realize that trafficking is a cross-border, is a transnational crime. It seldom starts where it actually occurs. Most of the time, it starts in the country of origin, not the country of destination. So we need to cooperate with the sending countries. We need to cooperate to prevent it and to prosecute it and to take care of the victims. Even after they go back to their country. So basically, internationally, what we try to do, first of all, we do a lot of bilaterals with sending countries that we know we have issues with some of their citizens when they come as potential victims. We also take this into multilateral forums such as United Nations, such as the United Nations Social and Economic Committees regionally, IOM, ILO, all of these bodies. We need to bring it to the surface that we are there, that we're doing our part, but doing our part is not enough. They have to do their part as well, in sync with us, and we have to cooperate. Many things that we do, even after we rescue a victim over here, like recently we launched the Victims Assistance Fund. The Victims Assistance Fund was approved by the Cabinet earlier this year, and it was launched, and it is actually in force and working. What it does is that for verified victims, verified by the judiciary, of course, we give them a grant to help them restart their life when they go back home. If a judge requires that this person stays in Bahrain to follow up the prosecution and to testify in court, in addition to this grant, we give them an income while they are here based on a judge's request. First of all, this is extremely important to prosecute. Because the psychology of victims is that they just want to get out. They don't want to testify. They don't want to relive the experience. They don't want to confront their assailant. So one of the best ways to prosecute is to help the victim help you. But after they have this grant and they go back home, what happens to them then? This is when we cooperate with their governments and we cooperate with NGOs. So they take them in, they help them start a life, maybe small business, help them rebuild.
Yeah.
It's very important for us. It's important that people don't come to Bahrain and for whatever reason leave feeling that they were not done justice. Yeah. This fund that we give them is not compensation by the government. The compensation is by the person who actually, the criminal. Yeah. But what we are is recognizing that these people need assistance to start a life. And by using the fund, we help them help us prosecute.
Yes,
and stay in Bahrain to testify and take it to a fruitful end. So we don't do this alone. We do it with the help of international bodies, with existing experiences on how to care for victims once they've gone back, how to help them use the money that was given to them to restart a life and not fall back, because the cycle that got them into victimization could be repeated when once they go back and everything is reset, go back to their situation at home.
Yes.
Everything that we do it based on best practices internationally and in cooperation with the most competent of bodies that we can find around the world.
Yes.
Because, like I said, this is first of all a cross-border crime, this is transnational, and it's not something that we can combat in isolation of everybody else.
The feelings of, or basically the situation that people that are victims of trafficking are very immense feelings of being let down. They want to get through a problem very quickly. If they are rescued at the end, as you said, they just want to go home. They just want to get it over with. It's basically shutting down in order not to hear the problem itself. But the fact that the fact that you basically, the National Committee follows up until they are back in their country and back on their feet and able to be part of the community again and the society, to work and to give and to take as is rightfully so, is also in a great part in education on your part. You educate the people, the victims that come to you, and you also educate the society around them how to deal with them. How did you get to build this multidisciplinary team that helps these victims and also helps the society integrate them back into them?
We work with international bodies that has representation in every country in the world. One of our big partners is the IOM, the International Organization for Migration. Yes. And they have branches not only in capitals but even in rural areas. And we seek their assistance. We involve the embassies and we involve them so that there is care taken of the victim once they land in their country. Sometimes the victims need to be relocated. Sometimes they are in danger if they go back to their own hometown, because the criminal organizations that traffic them still operate over there. We work with them. Of course, we cannot operate outside the jurisdiction of Bahrain as a government entity, but we can cooperate through known existing apparatus such as the IOM, such as NGOs, and we tell them, we ask for their assistance. In many cases, we actually do see victims that are eager to get out, but not eager to go back home because they're afraid of what would happen to them. Yes. And we don't let them down, because in this day and age, you can't leave somebody like that. There exists mechanisms, and Bahrain is a member of an international community that is working together to assist them and to combat the crime.
Yes. Following years of dedicated efforts in achieving, as you said, the Tier 1 status in the U.S. State Department of 2018 Trafficking in Persons Report, the TIP, this comes as an indicator of success. And other indication, what are the other indications or procedures taken by the committee to assess its progress of work? I mean, you've reached this milestone. What comes next?
The issue is reaching this milestone, reaching Tier 1, puts a big burden on us, because very few countries, 15% of the countries around the world make it to Tier 1, 85% of the countries don't.
Yeah.
So trying to get there was one thing, but staying there is another. But we look at it as an indicator. We don't, it's not the goal itself. It's an indicator that we are on the right track, yes, moving. We are far from it. There are so many things that needs to be done. We have the understanding now. We have the systems and mechanisms in place, and we can't just stop here. We have to go back and look at how we're approaching it. Forced labor is an issue that we have to deal with. Servitude through debt, and modern slavery. We need to involve more of society. I'm personally happy that the way we are, the interest that came in the last month after the announcement of the TIP report and Tier 1 and the interest, the societal interest that we received, allows us to build on this into creating more awareness. This is one end. We have to work on reaching more. We did a lot of outreach locally, yeah, but that's not enough. And the most important element is that trafficking is an evolving crime. It is a very old one. It's not a new one. It's centuries old, millennia even. But it evolves, it changes its form, it changes its practices. And we have to evolve with it. We have to update what we're doing. We have to keep on top of what is being done in the market. But most importantly is there is a segment of people who don't know that some of their practices could be defined as trafficking. Okay. They look at it as everyday practice. They look at it as something that is, yeah, everybody does it. Yeah.
Well, we've seen that social media can have a very big effect on how trafficking in society is viewed, and whether a person is trafficked or not, or whether criminals themselves know that they're actually doing something wrong. What can you tell us about the factor of containing media, or basically trying to save victims through media because of some of these videos that have come out recently? What can you tell us about how media is involved in basically saving people?
Media is extremely important, but you have to understand your audience. I'll give you an example. When we're looking at social media, in Bahrain, for example, the applications of choice are Twitter and Instagram. Yeah. In migrant communities, it is still Facebook. Yeah, true. So we need to work with the platforms that they operate. They use Facebook to communicate with their families back home. So we need to be active on Facebook to address them, while we need to be active on Instagram and Twitter to address our own nationals and create awareness. Yes. Because creating awareness is different between addressing the potential victim and addressing the community in which they live. So we have to work with multiple platforms. We have to understand multiple languages. Yes. And use whatever is accessible. Some of these workers in Bahrain, the only access they have is a simple mobile phone. Okay. There's not a laptop or a computer or a satellite TV, etc. And even if they're watching a satellite TV, there's a 5,000 channels. You can't be on 5,000 channels. True. You have to choose the medium that works for them and do it both here, and because of the technology now, do it here and do it in their home countries.
Yes.
Sometimes they get advice from their home countries on where to go in Bahrain, which is an extremely interesting phenomenon.
Yes.
But this is where we start dealing with the NGOs in their countries and the government in their countries, so that their families know who to address. The case that I told you about with the 90-minute rescue,
Yes.
it came from a family member over there. The family member in the country found our email and addressed us directly. So it's not the worker, but it's somebody in his country or her country. Now, we need to be accessible to their family members.
True.
Their family members come from 194 countries around the world. We have to be there in all of these countries.
And they have to have the right information.
And they have to have the right information. This is the size of work that we need to do.
Perfect. So reaching Tier 1 was one milestone. Another milestone is that Bahrain has presented its first voluntary national review at the high-level political forum for sustainable development of the UN Economic and Social Council during the period from 16th to the 19th of July this year. During Bahrain's participation, our guests, the CEO of the Labor Market Regulatory Authority, the LMRA, and Chairman of the National Committee to Combat Trafficking in Persons, the NCCTP, Ausamah AlAbsi, took part in a panel discussing the title Migration Governance in GCC Countries Towards Safe, Flexible and Sustainable Societies, held in partnership with the government of the Philippines and cooperation with the International Organization for Migration, the IOM, and the Migrants Forum in Asia as part of the accompanying events of the high-level political forum on sustainable development at the UN's headquarters in New York. Bahrain's review received wide appreciation, and in particular in regards to the issue of protecting the rights of expatriate workers and the facilities provided to them.
The government of Bahrain has been very involved in the negotiations for this global compact for safe, orderly, and regular migration. As a country that receives many, many foreign workers, Bahrain has shown a very progressive approach, ensuring that migrant workers in particular have the opportunity to change employers. This is an issue in many countries that has restricted the rights of migrants, and that I think this step is good for the economy, it's good for employers, it's much better for migrants. So it has featured, I think, as a very progressive step that we have to hope many other countries, both in that region and throughout the world, will want to follow.
Bahrain has been really enormously innovative in addressing human trafficking and being very open and honest to look at really underlying the incidence of human trafficking and how to address it. I'm quite impressed at how the government has taken an honest look at particularly human trafficking in the labor market situation. Mr. AlAbsi mentioned that a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week hotline was open to be available for victims of trafficking, and found that the majority of people who access that hotline needed information about laws, regulations, access to justice, information about functioning in Bahraini society. And in the Bahrain, the majority of cases of trafficking were found to be in the context of labor exploitation and abuse, whereas in other parts of the world, we often see that more focus on sexual exploitation and abuse. Here in Bahrain, in addition to being available to victims or potential victims and giving them means of redress and access to assistance as well as to justice, the government has taken a real stand in terms of prosecuting the perpetrators and taking criminal action against those who engage in trafficking activities. There have been very few countries in the world who have been able to successfully undertake prosecutions, which sends such an important message in a justice system.
Bahrain has one of the best laws in the GCC area when it comes to migrant protection. And in fact, we are looking at your reforms, we are hoping that it will snowball to the rest of the GCC area. What LMRA is doing for our migrants is something that's very commendable. And in fact, Bahrain has been a very good host to 60,000 Filipinos who are living and working there, who are very happy and who would like to stay. The government of the Philippines is very thankful to the government of Bahrain, and this year we celebrate our 40th year of diplomatic relations.
We really value what you bring to the table. With that, all the structures that are in place.
Welcome back. Now, during that panel, specifically the Migration Governance in GCC countries towards safe, flexible and sustainable societies, how did you perceive the reactions that you got during the panel?
The panel itself, the concept of this side event was unique. We were discussing the Sustainable Development Goals. And the Sustainable Development Goals were launched a couple of years ago.
Yes.
Towards 2030, and it's all about having societies that are resilient, that are sustainable, and the theme is leaving no one behind. When we look at societies of the Gulf and Bahrain as an example, half of these societies are expats, migrants living over here. They are giving a valuable contribution to the economy, but not only the economy. They are parts of society. They live a life over here. They raise their children over here. They enrich the social and cultural scene with their presence. So you cannot look at the Sustainable Development Goals only from a national point of view, because you transcend national in a society like Bahrain, where you have everybody from all over the world. So what we decided to do is to have a side event that talks about migration management, but from the perspective of Sustainable Development Goals. How can you have sustainable development unless you have the protection, unless you have the access to justice, unless you have all the guarantees that are given to a national, given as well to the non-national living on this land.
Yes.
So we decided to do something that was very unique. It was not done before in the high-level political forum, which is to talk about migration, and not to talk about it from a national point of view, but as you've seen on the panel, there is a sending country like the Philippines, country of origin, a country of destination like Bahrain. There is the IOM, and the IOM is the United Nations Migration Agency.
Yes.
So they are the official body in the United Nations to look at issues of migration, as well as an NGO network. The Migrant Forum of Asia is not an NGO itself. It's a network of many NGOs coordinating their work together, and this is their director that you saw there.
Sara AlBuraik.
No, William Goyce.
William Goyce. Oh, okay.
What we brought over there, I think, is a very interesting approach. That as a country, as a receiving country, we are willing to openly discuss and work with sending countries, with international bodies, with NGOs. We have nothing to hide, and we're willing to cooperate with everyone.
Yeah.
This sense of cooperation, sense of openness, and a collective, one of the most difficult things you could ever do sitting on the podium of such a forum and having everyone there is when you finish what you have to say and you open the floor for questions, because you need to have enough confidence in what you're doing to open yourself up to anyone in the audience, from an international body inside the United Nations that could come and attack you, that could come and criticize you.
Yes.
we went over there with the confidence that what we're doing is right, with the confidence that that the collectiveness brings.
Yes.
We're not alone.
Yeah.
We don't shy away from cooperating with the sending countries openly, international bodies openly, NGOs openly. If we have a problem, as you've heard Michelle Klein said, you admit you have a problem, you start addressing it.
Yeah.
That spirit was unique in that particular forum,
Yes.
and was very well received.
Yes.
To the degree that that Louise Arbour, which you also saw, came to us and invited Bahrain to participate again in an upcoming event. They wanted us to repeat what we're doing because they thought it was very refreshing, and it's a productive approach. Yes. Exactly.
Well, when people listen to us speaking here about basically keeping the laws and protecting the migrant people that are coming to Bahrain, there is a lot of confusion with the society when it comes to migration. Migration doesn't necessarily mean that the person is leaving their country and coming to live somewhere else forever. It could be that they are coming, as in Bahrain the case is many times, they come to work in Bahrain and then they gather the money and collect themselves and they go back to their countries and build their own businesses, their homes, and so on. We have very terrible abuses of migrant workers all around the world. We have war-stricken countries where the people run away in order to work somewhere else and they don't find work. Can you tell us about, just set the record straight for how migration is different when we talk about migrants coming to the GCC or to Bahrain in particular, and people that are running away from war-stricken countries and migrating to whether the European Union or the US or any other countries, and how they're treated there?
Thank you so much for this question. We need to set the record. In Arabic, we have a problem. There is migration and there is immigration.
Yes.
Migration is circular, is temporary. In accordance with the United Nations, anyone living outside his country for a year, for whatever reason, is a migrant.
Yeah.
So even our children studying abroad, they're migrants. Anyone who lives outside his country is a migrant. An immigrant is somebody who changed country, went for good. Unfortunately, in Arabic, we only have one word for that, which is hijrah. It works for both, and this is where the confusion in Arabic comes. There is another one, a sub-category of migration, which is refugee. Yes. Which is war-stricken, yes. Sometimes natural disasters, whether the natural disasters are fast or slow, like environmental degradation. The United Nations right now is working on two compacts, the Global Compact for Migration and the Global Compact for Refugees. Yes. They're working in parallel in order to create the clear distinction between what is a refugee status and what is a migrant status. Yes. Immigration is a case, all cases, all three, immigration, migration, and refugees, are cases of national sovereignty. So any destination country has the right to say whether they're going to take migrants, immigrants, or refugees or yes. not, and under what conditions. So exactly. Nobody is disputing that. But it is a global phenomenon. It happens. Migration has been happening for thousands of years. Yes. And even refugee status, although it is a new word, refugee status have been happening for thousands of years for all kinds of natural disasters and wars. Yes. We have to be part of this world. We're thankful that, for example, for Bahrain, the region we are living in is a stable region. Yes. We don't have refugees, we don't have disaster induced migration or people moving. What we actually do have is a vibrant economic environment that offers opportunity for people to come and contribute to it as well as avail of it.
Yes.
But we should not shy away from the word.
Yes.
Migration is not a bad word.
Okay.
By definition, it is temporary. By definition, it is circular. By definition, it has a beginning and end. And if we address it as such, then we'll be joining the rest of the world who are discussing it and trying to guarantee certain rights for the for the countries of origin, countries of destination, and for the migrants themselves.
Yeah. We have, the subject is very broad, and we have reached the end of our program. But very briefly, if you could just tell us about the LMRA works and their contributions in collaboration with the National Committee in this regard. What are the future plans and projects?
At the LMRA, we believe that an organized and well regulated marketplace where people have equal standing, where people understand their rights and obligations, whether they are employer or employee, and where people have access to information and access to justice. The LMRA takes care of, manages, and regulates up to half the population of the country.
Yes.
And I say population instead of workforce,
yes,
because they live over here, they contribute to everything that we do in our lives, and they live their lives. And we need to address it as such. So the cooperation between the National Committee and the LMRA is so close that you don't know where one stops and the other begins.
Yes.
And this is how it needs to be done. So our inspectors, for example, are not only there to inspect the labor conditions or to inspect the legal status of workers, but they're also an access point for workers. They can be, the workers can actually ask for their assistance, for their protection. And this is when they start linking with the National Committee and the National Referral Mechanism.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ausamah AlAbsi, for being with us today. And we would like to thank you for watching and see you next week in another episode of Inside Edition.